for our productivity event, Process Excellence in a Day with our partner Nintex. This webinar is part of a series of webinars around process excellence, and this webinar will be around workflow management specifically today. So new webinars are taking place each week through June and July. So feel free to register for any of these webinars on our website or watch the past webinar recordings on demand. So a few housekeeping notes. So before we start, so we encourage you to submit your questions during the webinar using the chat window of your Teams. We'll address as many questions as possible after the presentation. Questions will be asked to you in the chat as well during the presentation, so feel free to keep the chat open and submit your responses during the meeting. And today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing after the webinar. So let's introduce our presenters. So we've got Austin Edwards. So Austin is a manager within Protiviti UK's business performance improvement practice, specialized in intelligent automation, process improvement, and digital transformation. Austin works with clients to improve business processes while leveraging the right technology. We've got Charlie Phipps as well. Charlie is part of our technology delivery practice at Protiviti. He's one of our software implementation consultants. Charlie works with clients to implement the right technology solution to respond to client needs. We've got Alex Baker as well. Alex is part of our technology delivery practice at Protiviti. He's one of our cloud solution architects with over 10 years experience in various industries. Alex helps to develop and deploy comprehensive solutions around SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure. And my name is Niklas Perner. I'm an associate director at Protiviti, and I will be moderating today's session. In terms of the agenda for today, so we'll have a couple of slides on Protiviti, then we'll jump into intelligent automation. We'll have a couple of slides with Austin. Then we'll have an overview of Nintex Workflow functionality, and then we'll have two examples demonstration done by Alex, and then we'll end the session with some questions.
Hey,
okay.
Nicholas, I just noticed that I don't see a chat function in this Teams. I don't know if Carl, if that's something you can enable, or as far as the question format, perhaps people can just speak up and ask if we can't do that.
I've got access to the chat. Just posted something. I don't know if you can see it.
I can see the chat, so that should be there.
Okay, that's fine. I can't see it, but I'll have Nicholas as moderator should be able to field any questions.
Yeah, I can see people responding to my chat, so that should be right.
Great.
So let's. I've got two slides on Protiviti just to introduce who we are. So for those who are not familiar with Protiviti, we provide consulting solutions in finance, technology, operations, data, governance, risk, and internal audit to our clients around the world. We serve clients through a network of more than 85 locations in over 25 countries. We've got around 6,000 professionals providing a host of consulting on internal audit solution to over 60% of Fortune 1000 companies and 35% of Fortune Global 500 companies. So more specifically, move to the next slide. Here we go. More specifically, our services are organized around technology consulting, internal audit, and financial advisory. business performance improvement, and risk and compliance. And we do work with all different industries. So if you've got any questions about productivity, feel free to contact us about all different services that you can see on this slide, and we'll share the slides as well with you after the presentation. So I will hand over to Austin now, and we'll move into the intelligent automation section.
Great. Thanks, Nico. Good morning, everyone. So I'll talk a little bit about intelligent automation more broadly, but I think this is a nice slide to kind of position where intelligent automation fits in the overall process excellence journey. So this is our process excellence cycle. Now, processes are really the foundation of any business. And so this having process excellence is a great method to consider as you balance processes, people, technology within your business. So we have the three components of understanding your processes, improving them, and managing them. And as I mentioned, you can balance the people and technology aspect of this. So understanding your processes is definitely the start and very important. So we can talk about process modeling, process mapping, some of those traditional methods. I think in the last webinar, we talked a little bit about ProMap, which is one of Nintex's tools to map processes. In addition to those traditional methods, we're seeing more technology around perhaps process mining you may have heard of, data analytics. These things are all used to help understand your processes. After establishing that understanding, we're moving towards improving on the bottom left of this screen. So this is where you may have different process optimization techniques. So Lean Six Sigma has been around for a long time. What process tweaks can you do to improve those processes? This webinar today, we'll talk a little bit about automation in more detail. So that's another key component of improving processes. So we're talking about workflow tools, RPA, workload management. Again, that balance of technology and different processes and people to improve processes. And then in the top left, we have managing processes, which is the last step. This is really about establishing that innovation culture. So after understanding and improving your processes, how are you then managing them? What kind of management information do you have? How are you tracking results of the benefits that you may realize from different process automation or Lean Six Sigma? And that kind of completes the circle. So it's not just doing this once or twice. This is a continuous improvement cycle, and process automation being one of the ones we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. You can go to the next slide. So why is intelligent automation important? Today, things are moving very fast, obviously. Organizations are having a hard time competing with those digital age organizations. So customers, if you think about your customers are demanding, immediate responses. They want things now. They want it quickly, and they also want it for a very cheap price or even free. So obviously, think about your Amazon packages or any interaction with that sort of company. You have 2 clicks to get something sent to your door. So how does that translate to your business and your processes and product? Really, automation can be a great tool in that toolbox of process excellence to help achieve some of those demands that your customers and employees are expecting. And you can't really do that without eliminating that unnecessary manual processing. So a couple things on the left here. An APQC survey last year said that 75% of organizations are undergoing digital transformation. And then an IDC Futurescape article said by 2022, 75% of enterprises will embed intelligent automation into technology and process development. So really the key thing being here that most companies have already started on this journey, including intelligent automation, and if not, they will be very shortly to stay competitive in this environment. And then on the right here, we have a couple of quotes from our clients that we hear. So maybe your IT department is mentioning that there's a gap between legacy systems and modern technologies, and communication amongst teams is inadequate. Or your sales department is saying we have poor data quality and multiple CRM systems that aren't integrated, and we're not making decisions based on data, but rather on assumptions. In finance, another typical thing we hear is we have multiple old legacy systems that aren't talking to one another. We have additional steps to export data and move it to another system. And even in that process, we don't have great reconciliations to make sure that everything is being transferred appropriately. HR, we have these processes to onboard people and validate timesheets that are time consuming, they're manual. And then in procurement and in operations, further, we have discussions with our customers and experiences with them that have a lot of friction. It's not to the same pace that they expect, and it's costly for our teams to employ a lot of those people. So I think a lot of these problems are process problems, right? But I think it may not be as intuitive to say that these could be problems solved by automation. So I think these are types of problems that we hear when we're talking to our clients that makes us consider, have you considered automation? Have you explored that area at all? So these are problems that a lot of businesses will come across in multiple different areas of the business. So it's important to think about these types of things and whether or not automation might be the right thing for you. I think you can go to the next slide, Nico. So what is intelligent automation? So obviously this is anything around digital has quite a bit of hype around it. There's a lot of terms that come out and quite a bit. So really, I think it is important to kind of define what we're talking about here. You may have heard of some of these different technologies. You may have heard of RPA, workflow, computer vision, process mining. And really what intelligent automation is combining these different technologies that have been out there for some time to create optimized solutions, optimized automated solutions to help improve their processes. So although a lot of these have been around, so RPA has been around for a while, OCR, it's considering how do we take all of these technologies that we hear a lot about and actually build something that works and that provides benefits, and we can realize those benefits based on the cost of implementing them. You may have also heard hyper automation is what Gartner called it at the start of the year. Automation 2.0. We're all kind of talking about the same things here when we talk about intelligent automation. So some typical examples here of some of these technologies and how they may be combined into a intelligent automation solution. RPA is something that's talked about quite a bit, as well as OCR. So for example, you could use RPA and OCR. You could use OCR to extract information from, say, an invoice or a PDF, that translates that information into readable digital text. And from there, a bot would pick up that information and take it into an ERP system for processing that would then further go down the line in your process. So that's an example of where we're combining these different technologies that have been developed to create an optimized solution. Another typical example is maybe using process mining to understand your processes better, if you think back to that process excellence cycle. So how are we using the logs within our ERP system to build out a view, not based on assumptions, but rather on the data of our different processes. And perhaps you identify a process that's quite standardized through that method, which could be a great answer to use robotic process automation or a workflow tool to automate that. So how do we take all of this hype and different technologies that are out there to build something that works for our business and that we can realize the benefits from? So we see a lot of the vendors and technology vendors in these spaces have been expanding their features. They're either building on to their RPA solution, or they're building onto their core workflow solution, and they're expanding and building out a process mining tool to supplement that, or they've bought a process mining or an OCR tool to supplement that overall solution. So that's kind of where the market's really going. They're expanding horizontally to say, look, we will be your one-stop shop for automating or improving your processes, because we have all of these partnerships, or we've implemented this new system to expand our capabilities. So this is high level what we're talking about when it comes to intelligent automation. And you can go to the next slide, Nico. So a little bit more on this. So where does automation work? So the environment's changing very fast, but right now it works really well with a process that's high volume, it's repeatable, and it has business rules defined to it. So this is something where a robot or a workflow could be developed because the process is already quite standardized and you have a set of rules that can be coded into it. It's great at moving data from one place to another, from one system to another that, these aren't currently integrated, for example. And it's great for extracting different information, scraping information, moving files, making quick calculations, logging into systems. This is what works really well with some of these things at the moment. Where automation is still kind of picking up speed or maybe falling short are those non-standardized processes that have multiple process exceptions or variants. I think a lot of times when we work with our clients to start automating something, they have a process in mind at the beginning. What we start to realize as we ask more questions and even start developing a bot, for example, is that the business doesn't really understand their process as well as they thought they did. You'll always have one person in the group say, oh, well, actually, I do it this way in this particular case, or this is another exception to the process that sometimes happens. And all those things need to be considered by a bot or some sort of automation. Otherwise, it's going to break, and you're going to need to involve a human again, and now you start to see the whole thing fall down, or you may not realize the benefits that you expected at the beginning. It still has a hard time with interpreting emails or just written text, prose text, as well as making decisions based on a large amount of data or variables. So you can code in a couple bit of decisions at the moment, but really if you have that process where you need to consider multiple, 10, 15 different variables to make that decision, it's really tricky. For humans, it's actually quite easy to read the email and process the context and make the decision off of that. But we're not there yet with automation. Reading documents with a physical handwriting or a PDF, OCR is still not there yet. So I think I just wanted to highlight where it works and where it falls short as you kind of think about your own processes. And I would say, as part of the market moving and these technologies getting better, all of those areas where automation is falling short are starting to be addressed. So OCR technology is getting much better, and I've seen something the other day where an OCR technology is reading physical handwriting of numbers quite well at this point, making decisions based on large amounts of data or variables. You can hook up a lot of these automation tools with a machine learning algorithm if you have a data science team within your company, and really pass information to that algorithm to make that decision, and then it passes back the decision to the bot to go take further action. So these are examples where, at the moment automation is kind of falling short or may not be there, but it's a matter of years or months on some of these things where we will start to see that true intelligence that we talk about come through. Benefits are the first one you always think of is cost reduction, or how do I get less people working on this particular task? How can I get a return on my investment? And obviously that is an important part of intelligent automation. So that's really what you want to be doing. But there's a lot more benefits that I talk about here on the right. So one that's important is higher quality. So some of the quotes earlier around finance or IT is we have data quality issues. So that's also something I think about when I talk with my clients, when they say, the data in here is actually not that great, and automation could actually be something to improve the quality of data. The bot will do, or the workflow will do exactly how you've told it to do, and you reduce that manual error from a human. It's not just reducing the error, but it's reducing your overall operational risk, and it has all those audit trails built into those systems for any sort of audit or compliance or regulator to come in and take a look at how exactly are you getting comfortable with what this automation is doing. So I think that's also a great benefit. It's improving quality, enhancing productivity and employee satisfaction. Really a lot of companies I've talked to, they're not trying to reduce staff. I mean, some are, but really they want their employees working on those higher value add tasks. So you're freeing up those resources and that time for them to work on something that humans are much better at than a robot. Those creative things, those challenging problems to solve. It's not just employees, but it's also your customers. So how are they going to be affected by improved automation and things like that? And also ease of implementation. So we're not, a lot of these technologies, we're not talking about building that complex API or a large IT project that could take a year or something like that. So these are things that you can implement within a month or 2 months, 3 months, and start to see that return on investment earlier on in the cycle. I think you can go to the next slide, Nico. I think one other thing to think about with all of this is human-centered design. I think it's easy to get caught up in all of the technology and hype, and we need to implement these systems. We need to put RPA in. We need to put in a work tool right away. It really is important to keep humans kind of in the center of how you're designing these new tools. You still will need humans absolutely, throughout these processes, and you need someone to manage the bots or manage the outputs. So how do these different systems affect your customers? You know, if you rush to put in a chatbot, for example, on your customer service team, and the chatbot actually has only a couple of responses based on keywords that come back from a client. I mean, is that really going to be the objective you want to meet with your automation? So sure, you've cut back your call center staff a little bit, but the experience for your customer has actually decreased because they're not really getting the answers that they're looking for in a timely fashion. Same with your employees. So, you know, you start talking about automation in your organization, and your employees may start to get concerned. They may not be willing to, your process SMEs may not be willing to work with you so closely to explain exactly how that process works and all the details you really need to automate it, because they're worried about losing their job. So you need to consider and have that strong communication and change management with this. You know, actually, this automation is going to improve your role rather than take it away. You're not going to be spending all of your time on this tedious task, and instead, I want you helping with, you know, driving insights and looking at the data that's now produced from this automation to further improve our processes. Back to that process excellence cycle at the beginning. So I think it's important to keep this in mind with any sort of intelligent automation journey. I think that's my last slide. I know it's, you know, this is a highly technical area, and I think there are a lot of buzzwords and hype. So this was very high level, some things to consider with intelligent automation, but you know, happy to answer any questions or anything you guys are seeing, or where you guys on your automation journey.
Hey, Austin, this is Nicholas speaking. One question on my side. So so you talked a little bit about return on investment. For the people on the call, based on your experience, what would be basically the 2-3 criteria or topics to keep in mind when talking about return on investment, especially when you think about implementing a new technology for process automation? This is often a question that I've got from my clients, and I would be keen to get your view on this.
Yeah, no, it's very important, and I think it's even more important to make the actual business case to, you know, budget holders. I think that they can be skeptical at the beginning, and I would say it can be difficult. So you have a cost of a system, and you have some benefits that you want to realize. I think if you think about the benefits, there's obviously costs. So there are some tools out there that some vendors have put together. I've also seen dedicated tools that combine different systems to actually build the business case. So there's a lot of different metrics that you can consider. What's the volume of the process performed? How many full-time workers are spent performing that process? How much do they cost? How many variations are there to the process? I think, you know, there's quite a bit of different metrics that you can consider. And I think it's really important to set those out at the beginning of any sort of project, and track those throughout the automation journey. I think too many times you build the business case at the beginning and you implement the tool, and at the end, after it's been running for 2 or 3 months, you haven't built in either to the design or into your reporting what those key KPIs were to track your benefits. So it's really important to consider throughout the project. I think more of the tools that are out there are getting better at this. They're building in inbuilt reporting tools to realize your benefits and track those against what you had at the start of the project. And even separate tools that we have seen are able to link up to multiple different orchestration tools. So say you have multiple automation tools and to bring in that consolidated view. So I think key things are it is challenging, but it's extremely important. There are more KPIs and benefits to track than just cost and time. I think consider the experiences that you're going to deliver with the automated tool, all as part of that business case and building that out. And as you develop that tool, make sure you have that list of key objectives you're trying to get as you develop, so that at the end you can look back and say, here's actually what we've realized so far over the first 3 months of this tool being implemented.
Yeah. Thank you, Austin. So I think we'll get more questions during the webinar. So I would suggest moving to the next part, which is an overview of the Nintex workflow functionality. So as Austin explained before, so when talking about process automation, you can consider a number of different options. So you can talk about RPA, you can talk about workflow, you can talk about e-signature and so on. So we'll dive into workflow management, and obviously you've got many tools available on the market regarding workflow management, and Nintex is one of them. So we've decided to explore the Nintex functionality today. So we'll have 2-3 slides on the functionality proposed by Nintex, and then we'll make one example on how you can automate processes with a technology like this. So Charlie, over to you for the next few slides.
Thank you, Nicholas. Good morning, everyone. So something that I found very interesting is a recent study shows that 68% of all processes remain manual. And the important question is to ask why this is, especially after listening to Austin. We can see there are many benefits of intelligent automation. So most companies are still heavily reliant on manual processes, and the reason being is the number one reason is to automate your processes. You really need to understand your processes in the first place. So there's a lack of visibility into the operating processes. On the second point, it can sometimes be too hard depending on the tool that you're using to implement. Some tools require heavy coding experience and developers. And on the third point, we see that there can be a lack of power sometimes. People believe you can only automate simple processes. And what's important to note is Nintex is one example of a provider that mitigate these 3 areas of complexities that people have when automating. And we can see this if we go on to the next slide, Nicholas. So at the core of Nintex, you have your map and manage processing. So Nintex offer a mapping tool called ProMap. And once you understand your end-to-end process, agree the process amongst the organization. So in large organizations, you have several teams working on several parts of the process. Once as an organization, you understand your process and work together, you can collaborate to make suggestions for improvements. And then you can start looking into automating either sections of the process or the end-to-end process, depending on what it is. And then in the outer circle of that middle circle, number 2, we can see that this is where we have 3 sort of Nintex tools they offer. So you have your ProMap, your RPA, and your workflow automation. We'll be talking about workflow automation and demoing that today. But you can also link your workflow automation with RPA tools, other artificial intelligence for more complex stuff. And one of the things is, you have manual repetitive tasks that people do, and that can cost companies a lot of money on time. And you can use RPA tools with workflow tools to prevent this and to automate these repetitive tasks. Workflow is best for decision-based steps and orchestrating the process from start to finish, whereas RPA is probably better to automate the manual and the repetitive tasks that we just mentioned. Nintex is one example of a tool that does this. And what also they have is mobile and form capabilities, which we'll be showing later. The other thing that we plan to demonstrate is e-signatures. So this is particularly important during the pandemic we're in at the moment. But getting signatures for contracts or other important documentation does not necessarily require pen to paper anymore. We'll show an example, but you can send out an email, a confidential email with documents attached, a contract, for example, for a new employee, asking them to check over their contract, sign it, and send it back. This is all possible through this capability. You can also connect Nintex with APIs and other connectors for your web apps. And on the outer circles, we can see all the different technologies and tools that can integrate with Nintex. So you've got your communication points, your data sources, and other useful tools. If we move on to the next slide, we'll talk about the features of Nintex Workflow. Okay, so these are the key features of Nintex Workflow, which we plan to demonstrate for you today. So with a lot of tools, you can design quick and intuitively, but particularly with Nintex, as you'll see, they have a user-friendly drag and drop designer canvas. So minimizing and limiting the coding knowledge that is required to create a basic workflow or a more complex workflow to automate a process within your organization. You can automatically generate and sign and store documents. So by doing this, you can reduce errors through automatic generation of documents. You can store all documents in some kind of shared location to either ease access or restrict access. And as I mentioned, you can use e-signatures now with the capabilities that Nintex have. One of the most powerful things is it's easy to collaborate across channels. So you can send automated messages depending on where your organization works. So, if you work on Microsoft Teams or Slack or Skype, it doesn't matter. Nintex supports that, and you can then collaborate on your content and leverage built-in business logic to create a more automated solution. One of the other important things of features of Nintex is you can connect your work wherever it lives. So you might be working on premises, in the cloud, or even in a hybrid environment. But Nintex has integration capabilities to support how your business works. And you can, as we mentioned before, you can automate pretty much any business process to maximize time and efficiency, particularly for those repetitive tasks. And finally, you can govern, analyze, and drive efficiency of process automation through real-time process analytics. And this is becoming very powerful. Any questions?
Thank you, Charlie. I don't think we've got questions at this stage, but one question from me, Charlie. So I know you've been using different technologies for process automation. Are you able to briefly give a quick example in 2 minutes about one of your of your projects?
Yes, I can. So we recently worked with a client who had a issue with their process, and their process required them to create a monthly report, which consisted of probably about 150 pages, where about 50 people would contribute to this report monthly. And gathering all this data for this report and constructing this report actually became someone's full-time job, despite this being their job role. So Protiviti helped them develop an automated action tracker. We used SharePoint and Nintex Workflow. The reason for these tools was just because the client already had licensing. But the tool was developed and is now used by 3 teams, and it's no longer someone's full-time job to go and collect all that information to create this monthly report. This is all done through the solution that Protiviti developed using Workflow.
Thank you, Charlie, for this example. I would suggest moving to the next section of our presentation, which is basically more a demonstration of how you can apply or develop a workflow to automate processes. And I think we've got 2 examples that we would like to explore. So one is how to manage or to do your Microsoft Teams governance using workflow, and the other one is about a new user request process. So I will hand over to Alex. And again, if you've got any questions regarding what Austin presented before and what Charlie explained as well, then feel free to ask questions, or we've got a slot as well at the end of the presentation. So Alex, over to you. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. So one of the issues that our clients are seeing is that people are creating teams without sort of following Microsoft guidelines, or they're just not aware of the structure that they're being guided on doing. So this is around putting governance around the creation of projects, of teams and channels. So if we take these teams here, we then create a workflow. So this is Nintex Workflow Cloud. You can then see down the side here, we've got a number of operations which we can then drag and drop into the tool. You can then configure throughout, right? So there's no code in this one. So if we go into here, let me just close this off. We'll run through the process and then we'll go through each of these steps. Delete that. So when you trigger this workflow, there's a URL that you click to then get this form. So let me just open this form, or you can embed it. So in this case, if it's requesting teams, you would then embed this form within the within a SharePoint site, so then people can just go to the SharePoint site and request for a team. So in this case, we have a project name. So let's just call it webinar test. Let's just say it's for human resources. Start date. Let's say it started yesterday, and it will finish next week. So then you go through here, and I'll put myself as team. I will. You need to grab my email address, which is, give me 1 minute. So within here, and we say we want all of the channels, and we click submit. This will now actually send off to Charlie. So Charlie, if you want to share the message that came through to you.
Yeah, let me just waiting for the email to come through.
So I create a request for the teams. It will go through to Charlie to approve. Once he approves, it should automatically create a team within the team site.
And Alex, on this specific example, the starting point is basically a form that you complete and you submit, and then it goes basically to Charlie, because you indicated that Charlie would be the one approving everything.
Yeah. So who approves depends on the business. So it could be a central team that approves it. It could be, if you set up within, you can then look up within the Active Directory to see who their manager is, to then send an approval to them. You could do any number of ways of approval. Yeah,
I think that's a good question. That's a good question or a good point, because I think that in that specific example, this form is going to Charlie, but you could have basically a matrix in place, and based on your hierarchy and manager, then the workflow can identify who is the right person basically to route the request, right?
Absolutely. And if you have that sort of information stored in an HR system somewhere, you can also pull it out from there. Okay, Charlie.
So as we can see, I've received the email and it's asking me to complete the request approval. So if we go on to the request approval, we can see all of the details that Alex just filled in, and I get the option to either reject or approve, and then add some comments. So if I submit that and approve that, there we go.
Okay, thank you. So now if I share my screen again. So within here, once the workflow runs through, this may take a few minutes to run through and create the team. While it's doing that, we can have a quick look at the workflow itself. Here we go. So now we've got a web. The workflow automatically adds SFL. We've got webinar test. Within here, we've got a channel, and then we also have a second channel, and then you can include additional tabs. So if you have additional systems that you want to link in, you can include it within there. And as you can see, as the process is running through, it's adding in additional channels. Okay, so if we look,
yeah,
yep.
Quick comment. I think it's a great example, especially knowing that Microsoft Teams will be used more and more to increase collaboration and communication. I think that one example that I've seen with a client was to use Microsoft Teams for for project management, and to kick off the beginning of a project. A form was completed and a Teams site was created basically for people to work on this project and share documents and do all the planning and everything. But the starting point was a workflow form, and that to have consistency across all projects and to have all the same structure for all the Teams site. So yeah, it was just one comment on my side.
Yep. So now if we go into the workflow itself to see how this works. So you have a start event, and so in this case it's creating a form. So if we look at actually designing the form itself, we have the form, we have a number of fields within here. So in the next example, we have signatures. So if you say you wanted them to actually sign it first, we can just drag that in, and therefore you can get someone to sign the request. All right. Now within a form, if it's linked to SharePoint, you can then link it to the SharePoint items themselves. You can pull in additional information from other systems. And then you can include images, so then you can include your logo. You can configure multiple pages. So in this case, you've got one page and a second page. Then you can include variables throughout. So now going down the process, the first section here, so test, set team name, run parallel pass, that's all around manipulating the information that comes from the form to then be used later in the process. Within here, we have an assigned task. So in this case, you have a task name. I mean, we haven't got a description in here, but the outcomes are either reject or approve. And that was sent. In this case, we're just doing it to Charlie, as this is an example, but you could have a lookup to somewhere. You can also assign it to multiple people. So you don't just have to have it to one person. And then you would have a message in there. You can set reminders. You can also escalate. So if somebody hasn't completed a task, you can escalate it to their manager. Or you could just close the task automatically and let it run through to the next step of the process. So in this case, if Charlie rejected it, it would have just sent an email. So in this case, it would have just sent an email to me saying that the request has been rejected. So in this case, if it gets approved, it takes the initial date. So when I put in the start date, I made sure I put it before today. Otherwise, it would have waited. We would have had to wait till that date to actually have that team created. So it'll find that date, wait till that start date, and then it will create the team. It will add the owner. It will then post to the channel. So in this case, it posted a message saying that it created so welcome to the new collaboration space. And it says, if the channels exist, create the channels. And then it sends an email to confirm. And that's the end of the workflow. So let's say we wanted another approval before this one, right? So in this case, we can just drag this in, sign an approval. So you can have Express and form-based. So Express, you can actually get it through an email. And so therefore you can have email responses. So give you all the information in email, and all the user has to do is reply with the word approve or reject, and it can go through. So in this case, you could have another level of approval. We also have eject and approve and reject. You could have So for example, if it's purely just for them to do something, then you wouldn't have multiple outcomes, right? So if it's somebody to complete a document, right, they won't be saying, yes, I will do, no, I won't. They'll be completing that document, and then it will go to a review level. And so therefore you can do it that way. In this case, it's approve or reject. You can then design the form. You have a number of assignees, and therefore you can drag that into approve. And so therefore, when you have the first level of approval, it then goes to the second level. Okay. Are there any questions on this example?
Alex, one one comment on my side. So we can see that a lot of what you're doing is through drag and drop, right?
Yep.
So I think this is a point that Charlie made before. I think that one difficulty or one complexity of process automation using a technology might be I don't know, too much coding or need of some IT background to understand what you're doing. I'm not an expert, but I got the feeling that here there is a lot of drag and drop and not that difficult in terms of creating a workflow.
Yeah, so the actual creation of the workflow is fairly straightforward. Where the difficulty comes in is the designing of the workflow and getting that initial process and agreement of the process across the business. And that's where you can start introducing error issues. So as you come in with the development, it's the same with any software development. The longer, the later an error is found, the more complicated, the more costly it is to fix. But in this case, you don't have huge amounts of code to fix. You may just have somewhere where you just drag and drop something, or you just change a field somewhere. And so therefore it reduces that cost.
Alex, one question on my side.
Yep.
You mentioned when assigning a task, you can add many approvers. Does everyone have to approve it, or is it one person, when one person approves, it will move on to the next stage?
It's up to the individual who develops it. So you can say one person can approve, or all of them have to approve.
Thank you.
And then what will happen is also, if you say one person has to approve, once that one person has approved, then everybody else gets an email saying this task has been completed, and there's no action on them. Okay. Any other questions on that? Otherwise, I can move across to the next workflow. So in this case, let me just share the correct screen. Stop sharing, share. So this is an employee onboarding. So in this case, we're looking at a workflow that spans multiple departments and also sends out a contract to the employee to sign. So when we have it loaded, we can quickly walk through it. So in this case, you'll have a form that will run through. It will then go to HR for their approval. It will then go to payroll for approval. And then it will go to the individual to be added to sign their contract. And once their contract is signed, they will then have their account automatically created within the Active Directory. So if we go back one, we can then launch and see what it looks like. So in this case, So in this case, you would embed your form again in a SharePoint site, or potentially this could be within HR. They then request, so I'm going to request it for myself. So Alex, personal. So in this case, I'm filling out the information. We then fill out the position. So I'll be an admin, and I will start. That's how I start today. So I shouldn't be really completing this on the day that I start, but let's starting in Churchill in department 2. My salary £1. Manager email, let's put it as Charlie. Okay. Then if we go next, we then have this signature, right? So this is where you do your signature. I just did a squiggle, click done, and then you submit a user request. Okay, and I'll just follow on to the next page. So if we take it step by step, that should send an email to the HR. So there it ran through, it will go to the first one, to HR. So in this case, it will send it to myself. So let me just share my other screen. Okay, so this is where we talk about, I mean, it's called lazy approval, where you don't actually have to create a form, you can just reply. Oh, and now it's showing, let me just. Share here. So all I need to do is reply with approve. Click send.
So Alex, it means that you don't have to click a button, right, to go to the next step. It's just down through email, right? So yeah.
Yeah. You can also, within that email, I mean, you can add links and so on within it. It depends on whether you decide to use emails as approval or not.
Yeah.
So that one, if we look through the process again, so I've gone through and approved it. So that should come through. And in this case, we assigned it to Charlie. So Charlie, do you want to share your screen, and hopefully that will have come through?
Yep, so I have received the email. We've received the request. So again, I can either reply with reject or approve. In this case, I will approve.
Okay.
And I'll stop sharing there.
So now payroll is approved, or Charlie is approved. It will then go through. So that's the end of there. We then go through to, so it then generates the contract, and therefore tells, this is Adobe Sign. So it's Nintex Sign powered by Adobe Sign within here. So I should receive an email. This may take a minute or two for it to create the email.
Alex, just one question whilst we're waiting.
Yep.
So earlier you were showing the forms. When developing those forms, can you add custom validation to the forms?
Yeah, so you can create validation when someone puts in the value and when they submit it. You can also do sort of dynamic forms, so you can show and hide fields. You can create sections that then show or hide. You can create certain fields as read-only. You can put all sorts of formulas and variables behind it. So in this case, you've got, it's linked up to at the beginning of a form, and so all of those fields that are captured within it are then extracted out into the workflow. So
these forms can also be accessed via mobile, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, we get an email. So this is from EchoSign. So this is the Adobe one. So if I click on Review and Sign, it's opened a new tab. So let me So within here, we then have Nintex Sign powered by Adobe Sign. This is your standard Adobe Sign. So we have a contract, and at the bottom, it will tell you to sign here. So I'll say AB. You can then draw, so you can actually do a signature, sign an image, or you can use a mobile number to verify. Apply, click to sign. And that's me signing my contract as the new hired person. That will, let's show my screen again. That will then go through it and it will create the user and post to the channel. Okay, are there any questions on that? So within the
Sorry.
Yep. Nicholas,
Sorry, Alex. Yeah, there is a question regarding Adobe and to understand whether this is part of the standard Nintex workflow package. So I don't know if we can respond to this question. So I don't know if someone from Nintex would like to jump in and provide the response. I've seen the response from Nikki. Yeah.
Hi, Nico. I can answer in more detail. So as part of your Nintex license allocation, there is a 500 e-signature Nintex sign allocation given in the first 12 months. It's only for the first 12 months. So it's just a sort of a seeder really for customers to get to grips with and use. After that, there are additional allocations that can be purchased. So any new customer or existing customer can take up an allocation of 500 e-signatures through Nintex Sign for 12 months. And that's free of charge.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yep. Do we have any other questions? So I think with the workflows, you can make them as flexible and as complicated as you want. There is a if you're starting from nothing, there's a good way of sort of building up your maturity as you go through. So initially, I like to use the sort of, you start out with orchestration. So you send out tasks to individuals to complete. So you send it to, let's say, Charlie to do a bit of work, and then you send it to me to do a bit of work, you send it to Austin. Then we say, okay, well, you get that process up and running, you get your return on that bit, and then you say, well, you know what, Alex's bit can be automated quite easily. We then replace that bit out. And so you build out your process in complexity and in maturity. So you can say, well, Alex's job is simple enough. We can bring in an AI system, or we can replace it with some Azure tool, for example. So you can have, let's say it's, as Austin mentioned, it's just some character recognition. And so therefore I'm actually just reading a PDF document and writing out what's in the PDF document. And so that could be replaced by some form of automation fairly quickly and fairly easily. Okay. Over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Alex. So let me share my screen again. There we go. So thank you, Alex, for this demonstration and the two examples. I think that the two examples are quite representative of how a workflow can be implemented. So you can obviously see that it's quite important to have the process well defined at the beginning, and once the process is agreed, then you can basically start developing your workflow. And based on our experience, this is obviously a significant part of the process of the implementation is to discuss and agree the process with the client. So this is not something to underestimate if you are envisaging to use a technology like Nintex to automate some of your workflows or processes. So if you've got any questions, so feel free to share your question in the chat, or to ask your question directly. I think we are not a lot of people on the call, so feel free to speak up and ask your questions. I think that we are also happy to respond to any questions after this meeting. So we'll share with you the presentation and the contact details as well if you want to have a follow-up conversation. But we open the floor for questions now.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Hi, this is Silva. We all actually already use Nintex Workflow on SharePoint on-premise, and we're looking at implementing, e-signature. I think it's probably going to be very similar to the cloud version of Nintex Workflows. Just have a question: how does it work when you actually you've sent out this email to that new hire for signature? Do they have to have any specific access? How does it work? Because it's an external sort of email. So how does it go back into the workflow? It's like an incoming mail that goes, comes back into the Nintex workflow, and then you sort of figure it has been signed, or how does that work?
Alex,
So,
this one?
Yeah, so this is actually integrated with Adobe Sign. So the Nintex, in this case, Nintex Cloud will communicate directly with Adobe Sign, and Adobe Sign will send out the email to the individual. You'll provide them with an email address. And that signature process and acknowledging that person is managed by Adobe Sign. Then once that signature comes in, Adobe Sign will then communicate with Nintex to then say that they've signed the document. So if we look at it, there's 3 outcomes. Let me just share my screen again. See if I get the right one. Yep. So if we look at this one here, we have, so within here you say get signature, and so within there you have an expiry. So you have a maximum of, they have a maximum of 180 days to sign, otherwise it expires. You can then, they can just abort it and say no, we don't want to sign it, or in this case they complete it. You then go, Adobe says that it's been signed, and you can go to Adobe itself and say pass me the document, and you can then save it somewhere. In this case we're saving it to OneDrive.
Okay, so do you need, so that means, do you need the Adobe Sign option from Nintex and then register on the Adobe, you know, I mean, buy some licenses or whatever it is with Adobe? Is it like the, you know, double the cost, or is it just like, you know, you get everything in one package when you sign up for the Adobe Sign option in with Workflows?
So I'll take that one again as a licensing question. So Sylvian, thanks for your question. The Nintex Sign package is effectively white labeling Adobe, and so through buying your licenses in conjunction with your workflow license, effectively what you are getting is Adobe attached to that workflow, if you see what I mean. The costs that we have negotiated with Adobe for this integration are very cost effective. Let's put it that way. We've got a good deal with them. So my understanding of the Adobe pricing, and having worked with a number of clients now on e-signature projects, is actually it's cheaper to buy Adobe through Nintex than it is to go and buy an e-signature package from them directly. So quite how our negotiators managed to get that one signed off, I don't know, but it's a good deal. So the 500 free signatures that I mentioned before, as an existing customer, if you haven't taken that up previously, please feel free to take us up on the free signature package. But clearly 500 signatures, depending on your organization, may well not be enough in a 12-month period, in which case you can buy additional signature packages in chunks of 500 at a time. But it's worth chatting to your account manager at Nintex about what that cost might be, because it's quite lucrative to get it through Nintex. But effectively what you're getting is access to the Adobe portal and all the functionality that you would get through Adobe, but it's integrated into the Nintex workflow, and therefore becomes part of that workflow scenario.
Okay.
Does that make better sense?
Yeah, so you don't have to buy, like, you know, in both places.
You don't. No, you don't have to go and buy both. You can get it all in one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Alex, there is another question, which is basically, I suspect, if there is an issue within the workflow, if there is something stopping the workflow, how can you see it basically on your workflow? I suspect this is my understanding of the question.
Yeah, so within the workflow, you can see the workflow history, and therefore you can track through it. So if I let me just have a look here.
And I suspect as well, if the workflow breaks somewhere, it might also mean that the workflow hasn't, or is not well designed, or basically the process is not well designed, right?
Yeah, so when you build out a process, you need to make sure that. So if I go in, let me just share my screen. So within here you have workflows, and then so the workflows that you had before. So there, and then you have instances. So instances it ran. Now I've run that workflow. I did one yesterday, then one today. So here you can see that the status has actually failed. My guess is that because I gave the same email twice, it will have failed to create me in the so it'll tell you what steps it's gone through, and then yeah, create a user failed because I actually already created myself within the system, and so it's creating duplicate values. So it tries to create the same user a second time. So in that case, what you can do is you can put in tests and so on to make sure the user hasn't already been created, and if they have, you then put in various scenarios around that. You wouldn't normally just put in a simple, so if you're doing something with additional systems, you'd put in fail safes and catches and so on to make sure that the process runs the way you should, and you should be able to handle the errors as they come up. And especially if an error comes out like that, you want people to be notified to tell them that it's failed and that somebody needs to go in and do something about it in the worst case scenario.
So one other example, Alex, is during the demonstration you showed the email where you can basically approve or reject. Basically, why if you're making a typo when replying to the email, what happens?
So in that case, it will reply back to you saying, try again, essentially.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, generally, I haven't seen any client who wants to just approve and reject. Generally, somebody will want to create a comment or have attachments there as well, especially if they reject it. So hence I tend to use forms, and therefore you can then customize what people see, view. You can pull in additional information in various locations. And so therefore I standardize on tasks, because also within the task you can then manage it within the app, the Nintex app.
Okay. Are there any other questions? So Alex, I've got one question, or maybe I would like you to provide another example if possible. So I know that this is something that we've done for a client, which is basically dropping an Excel file into a folder, and that basically kicks off the workflow. And well, I find this very, very interesting because obviously Excel templates, Excel spreadsheets are widely used across organizations. So I'm sure you've got a lot of key Excel files within your different businesses. But then you can use basically an Excel template to start or kick off a workflow. I don't know if you can explain a little bit, Alex.
Yeah, so in this case, it's somebody providing a updated request list or task list, and they don't have access to the system, so they can't see the current tasks, and they can't add new tasks to it. So they update the Excel file, they email it to the person who has got access, they drop it into a document library in SharePoint. Then the workflow goes through, compares it against the list that they have. So in SharePoint, we have the list of requests/tasks, and then that will then trigger off various workflows depending on whether it's been updated or there's a new request coming through. And then based on that, they then follow through their process. So in this case, it was requesting resources to complete various tasks. So it will go to someone to assign the resource, and hence will then go through levels of approval and then onboarding.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I don't know if there are any other questions. So in that case, I will share my email address in the chat. So if you want to ask us specific questions regarding workflow management, Nintex, feel free to contact me after this call. We will share as well the presentation with you and the recording of the session. I think there is plenty of things to discuss around workflow management. So feel free to come back to us to discuss your needs, your problems. We'll be more than happy to schedule a call with you. Thank you very much all, and stay safe and have a good week.
Thank you.
Cheers then.
Thank you.